and today we'll talk about the interview done by the embassy recommendation, and I will also share how did I approach my research theme that eventually helped me get noticed. Hi everyone, I am Shri Priya. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, then I make videos about day-to-day life in Japan and how did I get a scholarship that enabled me to study for free in Japan. Talking about the interview which is conducted by the embassy in the first screening, the interview is conducted entirely in English and it takes about 20 minutes. The first question of any interview is the introduction part. What you don't want to do here is just mention everything in a chronological order. They already have your resume and your application to do that. So it's a good idea to prepare a brief introduction about your current academic status, such as if you're a high school student or if you've just recently graduated, and then mention briefly about your research interest. Lastly, I think it's a good idea to mention why you want to study in Japan and what motivates you, because that is one of the major things that they're looking here. In my case, that drove the conversation into them understanding why I want to come to Japan in the first place. And they asked me this question, that why I want to come to Japan and why just Japan? Why only Japan? Surely there are other countries where there's no language barrier and those countries might be more technically advanced than Japan, for instance the United States. Then why do I want to come to a country whose language I do not know? Now I think there are two ways by which you can approach this question of why you want to study in Japan. You can go ahead and cram a list of generic things about Japan, such as its culture, people are very punctual, and etc. etc. But I think what made me stand out is to add a personal note to it. So first of all, I mentioned that in Japan a lot of programs are thesis based, and what I wanted to do is research. So naturally it makes sense for me to take a research based program in Japan rather than a course based program in the US or in the UK. And on top of it, I think it's a good idea to mention any of your personal experience that is associated with Japan. For me, that was the case when in bachelor's I took an elective course which was taught by a Japanese faculty at the time. So I mentioned that what I learned from that and how did it benefit me. So it kind of added a personal note, and they knew that I'm not just interviewing for the scholarship for the sake of getting a scholarship. They knew that I really wanted to come here. Okay, so the next question, it threw me off a little bit because I had not prepared for it. They asked me what specific part of Japanese culture did I like, because I mentioned that I love Japanese culture in my introduction. So this is a tip for everyone who's watching this, just be specific. So if you like anime, mention that. If you like the food or the language, mention that. Fortunately, I had talked to my brother the day before the interview. He was working for a Japanese company at that time, and I had talked about his experience of how a Japanese company is so different than an Indian company and how they plan so far ahead. And that is something that intrigued me about Japanese culture. So they understood that and the answer seemed genuine. And finally, talking about your research, which is one of the most important parts of this interview. You should know that the people taking your interview are the people from the embassy or the MEXT. So they're not technical people. What you don't want to do here is use too many technical keywords which they have no idea about to intimidate them. Rather, think of it as explaining what you do to a relative. So you use simple words and help them understand what you do. They also asked me how my research will help both India and Japan. First of all, a little bit about my research. My research theme was to use data science for social problems such as gender inequality. For me, it was kind of simple because gender inequality is a social issue which affects both India and Japan, unfortunately, and it's a pretty relevant issue all over the world. So I just used that and said that it's gonna help both India and Japan if policymakers know how to design better policies. But what if your research theme is not about a social issue? Then I think it's a good idea to mention the real world applications of that field. For instance, if you're just making a machine learning algorithm, mention how that algorithm is going to help other companies. The next part is how to write a research theme. If you're applying for any scholarship or reaching out to any professor in general, this is one of the most important part of the application process. But the thing is, how could I possibly know what I will be researching about for the next 2 years? So I talk to my friends, then I talk to my friends of friends, and then friends of friends of friends. I mean, you get the point. And it turns out I didn't have to. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still needed to figure out what to write in my research theme. I still needed a niche, but I didn't have to know about all the technical specifications about it just then. Please note that this is my perspective of going from a bachelor's to a graduate degree, but if you're going from master's to PhD, then you might already know much more in detail of what your research theme will be about. The moral of the story is you don't need to know everything about your research theme just yet. But what your research theme should answer is A, what's your niche? B, why did you choose this niche? And C, what have you done to come close to this niche? So, how did I come across my niche? Well, in 2020, when the COVID hit the entire world, we were all stuck at home. And that's when I was reading about Abhijit Banerjee, who won a Nobel Prize for economics. I read that his work was on alleviation of poverty, and I didn't know if poverty could be alleviated, and if it did, then why are we not doing it? That intrigued me and made me study more about economics, and I stumbled upon this field called data science for social problems. To answer what have I done to come close to my research theme, I mentioned a few projects that I took during the college. Moreover, I mentioned about my internships, which enabled me with the technical skills that is required for my master's. This was a handful. I hope this video helped you. This is the last part of the MEXT series, and if you have any questions, drop down in the comments below. I guess we could do a Q&A sometime. After this, I will be shooting really exciting content about life in Japan. If you're interested in that, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. It's free, and I will see you soon. Bye bye.